Zachary Jonah had it all planned. He stood at the top of the marble staircase, his tie straight, his voice rehearsed, and a red velvet box tucked under his arm. One that didn't hold jewelry or love. It held the final blow. Divorce papers, signed by him. Stamped, dated, dressed in gold foil as if he was gifting her diamonds. The ballroom was humming with laughter and soft jazz, champagne flutes, clinking in the hands of people who never liked Halima to begin with. They said she was too plain, too quiet, too ordinary, too Baltimore. But that night, she walked in differently. Her emerald green dress shimmered beneath the lights. Her natural curls framed her face like a crown. She didn't just enter the room, she made the air pause. Zachary's smirk wavered, just for a second, but his ego, that remained. He cleared his throat, tapped a spoon against his glass, and the room fell into perfect silence. "I have a gift for my wife," he said, with a confidence that wasn't earned. "It's long overdue." Halima smiled. Not the way a woman smiles when she's surprised, but the way a woman smiles when she's already 10 steps ahead. He handed her the envelope, expecting tears. A scene, a meltdown, gasps, maybe even pity from his family. But what happened next didn't involve raised voices or broken wine glasses. She reached into her own purse and pulled out a red box of her own, smaller, sleeker, wrapped with precision. "I have something for you too, Zach," she said gently. The moment he opened it, his face cracked, not in anger, but in confusion, and then something close to fear. His mother's wine glass slipped. His assistant, Carice, froze near the entryway. The music stopped. And the man who once said, "She wouldn't dare," realized. She did. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you forgot to love yourself first? Halima did. She was the kind of woman who believed that love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. She wasn't raised on wealth, but on wisdom, the kind passed down through kitchen table talks, Sunday sermons, and neighborhood aunties who didn't need to be blood to correct you with love. When she married Zachary Jonah, the tech prodigy with old Boston money and a family name wrapped in influence, she thought she'd finally found peace. Not riches, not status, but safety. A home in a man who once said, "You're my calm in a world that never slows down." But what happens when the very person you calmed becomes the storm? She gave up her job to care for him after his accident, missed family cookouts, skipped sleep, and sacrificed her body and soul just to help him walk again. She bathed him when nurses were too tired, prayed over his bruised ribs, cooked every meal with hands that were starting to tremble from exhaustion. Not once did she ask for a thank you. She just hoped he'd see her again. Instead, when he stood back on 2 feet, he stopped seeing her at all. No more hand-holding, no more praises for her cooking, no more thank yous whispered late at night, just cold silence, followed by meetings that ran late, texts with no names, and the faint scent of cologne she never bought. She stayed, thinking maybe, just maybe, the man she married was still somewhere beneath the suits and strategy calls. But each time he looked through her, she felt herself disappearing. And if you've ever sat across from someone you once called home, only to feel like a stranger in your own marriage, then you know what Halima felt. This isn't just a story about a marriage fading. It's a story about a woman who carried a man through his darkest hour, only for him to abandon her the moment the light returned. While Halima spent months feeding him, lifting him, encouraging him, and speaking life into his weakest days, Zachary was already drifting toward a world where she no longer fit the picture he wanted to present. He healed, and the gratitude disappeared. He returned to work, and the warmth left his eyes. His company exploded in success, and his ego expanded with it. Suddenly, Halima was too simple, too soft, too comfortable, words he never used back when she cleaned his wounds and held his trembling hands. But the truth was even colder. He found someone else who fit his new lifestyle, someone who dressed the part, someone he didn't have to say thank you to. And while he built a secret life outside their home, Halima was unknowingly becoming the target of a plan designed to shatter her spirit. He wanted a grand exit, a dramatic moment, a spectacle, Christmas, in front of his family, in a mansion filled with chandeliers, corporate friends, and people who already doubted whether she belonged there. His goal was simple: crush her in the one place she had always tried her hardest to fit in. He knew she'd cry. He knew she'd fall apart. He knew she'd embarrass herself, and he was ready for it. But there's something men like Zachary often forget. Quiet women are not weak. Patient women are not blind. And loyal women? When they finally walk away, they walk away with a strength you never saw coming. Halima wasn't planning to beg. She wasn't planning to argue. She wasn't even planning to ask why. She had her own gift, a red box that held the truth he thought she'd never find. And when she handed it to him, the room didn't just react. It shifted, because the moment he opened that box, the CEO who expected a scene ended up facing something far more life-changing than tears, a woman who refused to break. So, the question isn't just what she gave him, it's how she gave it, because Halima didn't shout. She didn't throw anything. She didn't plead for decency in a room filled with people who judged her from the start. No, she wrapped her truth, neatly, with purpose, with dignity. And when he opened that box, what he found wasn't just a response to his cruelty. It was the quiet undoing of every assumption he made about her. He thought he knew her. He thought she'd stay small. He thought she'd fall apart for everyone to see. Instead, he became the one they looked at with shame. His own mother couldn't speak. His colleagues avoided eye contact. And the mistress, who thought she'd won, she learned that a woman with grace, receipts, and a plan can silence a bloodline without raising her voice. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll know exactly what Halima put in that box. You'll know why she didn't need revenge to win. And you'll understand how choosing yourself can sometimes be the loudest thing in the room. If you believe in dignity, strength, and second chances, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment if you've ever watched someone rise when they were expected to fall. And if you're new here, subscribe. This story is one you'll never forget. Halima never had silver spoons or marble floors. What she had was rhythm in the streets, warmth in every hug, and lessons in every front porch conversation. She was born on a rainy afternoon in South Baltimore, where the neighbors knew your name before you even walked. Her block wasn't filled with luxury cars or art galleries. It was filled with stories. Women with hands strong from work and hearts soft from faith. Men who barbecued for the whole street. Children who could turn a cracked sidewalk into a dance floor. Halima's mother, Amina, was a seamstress who believed every stitch carried meaning. Her father, Otis, was a sanitation worker who could name every child on the block and made sure none of them ever went hungry. They didn't have much, but somehow they always had enough. Saturday mornings smelled like hot grease and hair products. Braiding sessions turned into therapy circles. Her aunties weren't just relatives, they were the neighborhood's watchful eyes. If Halima skipped school, someone saw her. If she wore a too short skirt, someone spoke up. It wasn't judgment, it was love. She didn't grow up chasing validation. She grew up watching women hold families together with calloused hands and unwavering prayers. She watched her mother give away the last plate of food to a neighbor in need and still thank God like they'd just eaten at a five-star restaurant. That kind of love raised Halima. She was book smart, sure, but more than that, she was people smart. She learned early how to read rooms, how to sense tension, and how to make people feel seen. She wasn't loud, but her presence always filled a space. By high school, she was tutoring the younger kids and organizing church fundraisers. She didn't need applause. She just liked building things, memories, moments, a little peace wherever she could plant it. So when she left Baltimore for college on a partial scholarship, her community threw her a send-off like she'd won the lottery. Aunties cried. Uncles gave awkward hugs. Her mama packed 3 months' worth of frozen meals. And her daddy? He just said, "Don't let them change your heart, baby. The world ain't built like home." And she tried not to let it change her. Even years later, when she'd be sipping champagne in a room full of people who spoke in coded language and shook hands like they were hiding something, Halima would still close her eyes and hear the drums of her block, the laughter, the smell of fried fish on Fridays, the slow hum of her mother singing Anita Baker in the kitchen. That was her compass. The world would later try to make her feel small, but Baltimore had already made her whole. Zachary Joyner was everything Halima thought she'd never be interested in. Clean-cut, Harvard-educated, polished in a way that made you sit up straighter without knowing why. They met at a non-profit tech summit. Halima was there consulting on inclusive education apps. Zachary was the keynote speaker, son of industrialists, founder of a rising startup, and glowing with the kind of privilege you don't even notice when you've always had it. Still, he noticed her. While everyone else looked past her, Zachary asked questions, real ones. He lingered after her panel. They spoke about community tech access and the difference between innovation and displacement. He listened, smiled, and said, "You don't sound like anyone I've met before. I like that." Within months, he was flying to Baltimore to meet her family. The neighborhood lit up when he pulled in with his rental Tesla. Uncles peeked through blinds. Cousins teased. Her mother served stew like it was Judgment Day, and her father watched him eat every spoonful. Zachary tried. He wore jeans. He said, "Sir and ma'am," but Halima could tell this wasn't his comfort zone. Still, he asked for her hand 6 months later, under a tree in Patterson Park. No grand flash mobs or hidden cameras. Just a simple ring, a nervous smile, and the words, "You're the calm in my storm." She said yes because she believed him. But marrying into the Joyner family was like stepping into another country, one where love wasn't loud, where emotions were folded into napkins and expectations wore suits. The Joyners didn't talk over each other. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't hug unless it was Christmas or someone died. They didn't understand Halima, and they didn't try to. Her curls were untamed. Her jokes were earthy. Her background was unique, words wrapped in politeness but edged with sharpness. At their engagement dinner, his aunt leaned in and asked, "So what does your family do again, dear?" At their wedding, his mother insisted on cream linens and a string quartet. No dancing, no barbecue, no joy. Still, Halima smiled. She blended. She softened the edges of herself, hoping that love would be the bridge between worlds. She changed her wardrobe, chose neutral tones, sat straighter, watched her volume, practiced their wine etiquette, memorized their world. She did all of it because she believed Zachary loved her as she was. But in hindsight, she realized, he loved the version of her that made his world feel more grounded, not the version that actually belonged to one. The first year of marriage felt like a shared dream. Zachary was building his company, and Halima was freelancing in digital design, helping non-profits modernize their branding. Their loft in Cambridge was filled with books, plants, music, and mismatched mugs from street vendors. Zachary used to bring her breakfast in bed on Saturdays. Halima left notes in his suitcase when he traveled. They had inside jokes, game nights, and Sunday morning playlists that sounded like love in audio form. He'd say things like, "I don't trust many people, but you, I trust you with everything." And she believed that trust was love. When his business hit its first $1 million investment, they celebrated not with champagne, but with takeout from a hole-in-the-wall Caribbean spot she loved. He toasted with a plastic cup, saying, "To the woman who makes everything feel safe, even when I'm not." He called her the calm in my storm often. When board meetings went badly, when his father doubted his decisions, when competitors tried to undercut him, he'd come home, toss his jacket on the chair, and fall onto the couch beside her with a groan. "You know what I love about you?" he'd ask. "You don't need the world to see you. You just be. And it makes me want to come home." Back then, she thought that was a compliment, that not needing recognition meant she was his anchor. She didn't realize yet that being someone's calm often meant learning how to quiet your own chaos, how to swallow your needs so theirs could breathe. But they laughed. They danced in the kitchen. They talked about future children. even visited open houses together just to dream. It felt like partnership. She didn't see the small cracks, didn't hear the subtle changes, didn't recognize that, as his success grew, he stopped looking to her for peace and started expecting her to maintain it, alone. Still, during those early days, she loved him in full color. And when he kissed her forehead after a long day and whispered, "Don't ever change," she didn't realize he'd be the first to forget why he said it. Halima learned how to shrink without folding. In a world where men closed deals over cigars and women compared inheritance trust funds, she became fluent in silence. She smiled at cold remarks, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, smoothed out her edges to make space for people who barely acknowledged hers. She became good at hosting dinners she didn't enjoy, good at knowing which wine paired with which seafood, good at remembering who was allergic to what, and which investor's wife didn't like being seated near the windows. She wore her natural curls less, chose sleek buns instead, swapped her bright African prints for soft creams and greys. She didn't abandon her culture. She folded it gently, like a treasured item she promised to revisit someday. It wasn't shame. It was survival. Zachary never told her to change. He just stopped noticing her when she didn't. He praised her when she blended. He introduced her more at galas when she wore what his mother approved. He held her hand more when she wore heels instead of flats. And Halima, the girl who once held street festivals and community fundraisers in her palm, became a woman who took notes on country club conversations she couldn't relate to. Still, she carried herself with grace. When his mother made comments about her food being too seasoned, Halima smiled. When an investor asked if she was one of those boutique wives who found a cause, she chuckled and sipped her water. She never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled, because beneath the soft smiles and quiet nods lived a woman who still remembered where she came from. A woman who still said her prayers in whispers, who still read scriptures on her phone during long car rides, who still designed digital planners late at night, ones that would later build her escape. Halima wasn't weak. She was adjusting, and even then, buried in a world that never made room for her, she held herself, with the quiet dignity of someone who knew, "They might never clap for me, but they will never forget how I left." The call came just after midnight. Halima had just cleaned up the kitchen, folded a load of laundry, and was preparing her planner for the next day when her phone lit up. Unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but something in her chest tightened, a tension she couldn't explain. She answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Johnner?" "Yes. This is Officer Davis. There's been an accident. Your husband's vehicle was involved. He's alive, but you need to come now." The hospital was 23 minutes from their apartment. Halima made it in 15, running on adrenaline and half-formed prayers. She didn't stop to brush her hair or change her slippers. She barely remembered to lock the front door. When she arrived, the ER was buzzing. Bright lights, distant beeps, and nurses moving with calm urgency. The smell of antiseptic slapped her in the face. They had him stabilized, but seeing him, bruised, pale, unconscious, took the air from her lungs. Zachary's car had been hit at an intersection by a delivery truck whose driver ran a red light. His leg was broken in 2 places, 3 ribs fractured, shoulder dislocated, a mild concussion, internal bruising. They said it could have been worse, but that didn't comfort her. She sat beside his bed for 8 hours straight, holding his hand while machines hummed and buzzed. His face looked different when he wasn't in control, softer, smaller, almost childlike. She brushed a curl off his forehead and whispered, "I'm right here." Doctors explained the long road ahead. Surgery for his leg, physical therapy, weeks of immobility, possible nerve damage, no work for a while, no driving, no stairs. Zachary wouldn't be the same for months, maybe longer. His parents arrived later that morning, shocked but oddly composed, as if they were already planning the press release before asking how their son truly felt. They offered to hire round-the-clock care, private nurses, top-tier specialists, But Halima raised her hand and said, "I've got him." They didn't argue. They didn't help. They nodded as if passing off a burden. And from that moment on, everything changed. Because caring for a man like Zachary, who had always been in control, always the decision-maker, meant more than bandages and pain pills. It meant holding space for his frustration. It meant swallowing your own exhaustion. It meant watching the man you married slowly lose the version of himself he liked most, and never once letting it break you in front of him. The accident didn't just bend bones. It cracked the foundation of their home. And Halima? She was the one who stood in the rubble with her sleeves rolled up, ready to build anyway. The first few days at home were a blur. Zachary was in pain constantly, his leg in a cast, arm in a sling, ribs wrapped tightly. He couldn't sit without help, couldn't move without groaning, couldn't sleep without medication. The penthouse they once loved felt like a prison now. Their open concept layout was interrupted by medical supplies, wheelchair, crutches, pill bottles, ice packs. Halima taped up a chart to keep track of his medications. She cleaned every surface twice a day, cooked his meals from scratch, blending nutrition with comfort. She studied every instruction the doctors gave and memorized physical therapy routines before the therapist even arrived. There was no more freelancing, no more consulting, no more personal space. Zachary needed her, and she showed up every single time. She bathed him, dressed him, helped him use the restroom, sat beside him when he couldn't sleep, even when her own eyes burned from fatigue. He got frustrated easily, snapping at her over small things. The soup was too hot, the towel too scratchy, the lights too bright. He wasn't cruel, he was just broken, and broken people bleed on whoever tries to heal them. Halima never snapped back. She swallowed the sting, kissed his forehead and whispered, "It's okay, babe. We'll get through this." But at night, when he finally drifted off, she'd sit in the bathroom with the shower running and cry quietly into a hand towel. It wasn't that she resented him. It was that she was tired, bone-deep tired. No one asked how she was doing. Not his mother, not his board members, not even Zachary. To them, she was strong, reliable, built for caregiving. But inside, she was unraveling, slowly, quietly. She stopped doing her hair. It was always up in a scarf. She wore the same oversized sweats. Her skin broke out from stress. Meals were skipped. Sleep was stolen in broken intervals. Yet every morning she put on a brave face and started again. When the therapist came, they praised his progress. When the doctor called, they praised her diligence. But no one saw the emotional toll of being invisible in your own home. There's a particular kind of pain in watching the person you love suffer, and a sharper one in knowing that while they heal, you're silently breaking. Even in the storm, there were quiet moments that held beauty. Late at night, when the pain meds finally eased Zachary's tension, he'd lie there with his head on Halima's lap. She'd stroke his hair, humming old songs from her childhood. Songs her mother used to sing when times were hard, but hope still whispered. He'd look up at her with tired eyes and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And in those brief, tender seconds, she felt seen. They watched movies together, the old kind with heart and meaning. She fed him when his hands shook, wrote notes on his behalf when he couldn't focus, helped him shave when the stubble got itchy, cleaned his wounds like he was made of glass. He called her his angel, held her hand tighter when the pain peaked, cried in her arms once when the frustration overwhelmed him. It wasn't romantic in the way stories paint recovery, but it was intimate, raw, real, human. They spoke about things they hadn't discussed in years, his fear of failure, her dreams she had paused. They even planned a trip once he was better, a cabin in Vermont far from phones and meetings. For a while, she believed this chapter would be what made them stronger, because when he smiled at her with gratitude, kissed her hand and said, "No one's ever loved me like this," she thought, maybe, just maybe, the storm would pass, and they'd find their way back. She gave everything, not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that kind of love? It doesn't come from obligation. It comes from soul. By the third month, Halima no longer recognized her reflection. She hadn't worn makeup in weeks. Her inbox was full of unanswered emails. Deadlines missed. Clients lost. Projects abandoned. The woman who once ran consulting campaigns and taught digital workshops was now tracking medication schedules and insurance forms. Her planner, once color-coded with dreams and appointments, was now a scribbled mess of rehab notes and grocery lists. No one asked about her career. No one asked what she needed. When friends called to check in, she lied. "We're doing fine." When her mother asked if she wanted help, she said, "I've got it." Because Halima had been raised to carry burdens quietly, to be dependable even while drowning. Zachary healed gradually. His strength returned. His steps became more confident. He began taking calls again, easing back into the business world. His parents praised his resilience. Investors commended his discipline. But Halima? No one noticed that she hadn't laughed in weeks, that she skipped meals even when she cooked 3, that she no longer spoke about her own dreams. She wasn't bitter, but she was fading. And what hurt most wasn't that he forgot to say thank you. It was that as he returned to himself, he stopped seeing what she'd lost in the process. She didn't expect gifts. She didn't want flowers. She just wanted to feel like more than a shadow. But in Zachary's world, now refilled with ambition and power meetings, Halima became a quiet figure in the background, a woman who once held his broken pieces, now slowly breaking herself. The cane was the first to go, then the sling. Soon, Zachary was walking without aid, dressing himself again, attending virtual board meetings. Every time he regained control of something physical, a piece of the connection between him and Halima seemed to loosen. Halima noticed it before she wanted to admit it. He no longer needed help up the stairs. He didn't wait for her to adjust his pillows. He started eating without her, sometimes barely acknowledging the meal she placed in front of him. When his physical therapist cleared him for light gym workouts, he scheduled private sessions at a facility across town without telling her until after the fact. "I didn't want to bother you," he said casually when she found out. But she wanted to be bothered. She wanted to still matter. For months, they'd existed in a rhythm built on dependency. And even though she never asked to be his caretaker forever, the abruptness of his independence cut like a blade. It wasn't that she wanted him to remain weak. It was that as he got stronger, he seemed to forget how much of his strength had been borrowed from her. The warmth began to fade. The little thank you touches disappeared. No more forehead kisses. No hand-holding while watching TV. Instead, he became preoccupied. Calls at odd hours. Laptop always open. Eyes constantly on something. Anything other than her. She asked him one night, "Do you feel different now?" He shrugged. "I just feel like myself again." But she didn't recognize the version of him he was becoming. He was sharper now, less patient, more focused on efficiency than emotion. He stopped asking about her day. He didn't even notice when she cut her hair or when she skipped dinner 3 nights in a row. Recovery had given him his body back, but something in his spirit had closed. And Halima, still lingering in the background, felt herself drifting further from the man who once needed her for everything, and now barely needed her at all. It started with the scent. Zachary had always worn subtle cologne, sandalwood and bergamot, the kind of scent that stayed close to the skin. But one morning, as Halima leaned in to hug him before he left for the gym, a different fragrance lingered. Sharp, musky, new. She didn't comment on it, just filed it away. Next came the late nights. At first they made sense. His company was scaling again, and his calendar overflowed with investor calls and tech briefings. But after a while, the explanations stopped making sense. Traffic was crazy. Had to meet an investor at the club. Grab drinks with Marcus. You remember Marcus, right? She hadn't heard that name in over a year. He stopped texting to say he'd be late. He stopped giving specific times. He stopped offering explanations at all. One night, he came in past midnight, clearly showered, shirt unbuttoned just enough to make her stomach twist. She asked softly, "Did you eat?" He nodded. Yeah, I'm good. And that was the end of the conversation. The final clue came from sound. Halima had always trusted her instincts. But on a Tuesday afternoon, while she was folding laundry, Zachary's phone buzzed from the kitchen counter. He was in the shower. The screen lit up. A message preview from a contact, saved only as K. Just a laughing emoji. But it was the kind of laugh that had once lived in her home. Light, teasing, flirty. Halima didn't open the message. She didn't need to. Her body already knew what her mind hadn't wanted to admit. Something had shifted. Someone else was present. Later that evening, she mentioned the message. Not confrontationally, just gently. He brushed it off. It's nothing. Just a colleague. Do colleagues send emojis at night? He raised a brow. Are you checking my phone now? She blinked, stunned. No. I saw it by accident. Right. He turned and walked away. No denial, no comfort, no attempt to soothe. Just a man who had already moved into the justification stage of betrayal, where lies aren't needed because detachment has already done the work. Halima sat on the couch that night, arms wrapped around her knees, the room echoing with a silence so loud it felt deafening. Halima had been raised to trust her gut. Back in Baltimore, the women in her life always said, "A woman knows. Before she has proof, she knows." But knowing and accepting aren't the same. She didn't want to believe her husband, whom she'd nursed through broken ribs, spoon-fed oatmeal, when his hands trembled, massaged when he couldn't sleep, was now entertaining someone else. She wanted to be wrong. She looked for reasons to doubt her own instincts. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the scent was a new cologne he picked up at the pharmacy. Maybe the late nights were really work. Maybe she was just being paranoid from emotional exhaustion. But deep down, the truth sat in her chest like a weight. She stopped bringing up her concerns. Every time she tried, his answers grew shorter. Her questions felt intrusive. His tone grew cold. One evening, she made his favorite meal: stuffed salmon, seasoned greens, and sweet potatoes. He barely touched the plate. "I already ate," he said, eyes on his phone. She wanted to scream. Instead, she just nodded and cleared the table. She didn't cry in front of him, didn't beg for his attention, didn't press. She suffered in silence, because somewhere in her, hope still lived. Hope that maybe it was a phase. Hope that maybe he was just overwhelmed. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd remember how she held him when he couldn't walk. At night, she curled into her side of the bed, far from him. He no longer reached for her. No more gentle touches in the dark. No more whispered goodnights. The man who once couldn't sleep without her voice now turned his back. And Halima, wrapped in a hoodie and her own quiet heartbreak, realized that the worst kind of loneliness wasn't being alone. It was lying next to someone who no longer saw you. It wasn't just distance anymore. It was dismissal. Zachary didn't just stop noticing Halima. He began resenting her presence. When she offered input on a business article he was reading, he said, "You wouldn't understand this space." When she asked if they could go on a weekend getaway to reconnect, he laughed. "This isn't the time for vacations." She brought up starting her design business again. He waved it off. "Now's not the time to play entrepreneur." Play. The word stung more than any curse. It became clear he no longer saw her as a partner, not emotionally, not intellectually, not professionally. She was just there, convenient, predictable, forgettable. One afternoon, she overheard him on a call. "She's comfortable, doesn't want more. She's not really cut out for this level anymore." He wasn't talking to her, but he was talking about her, and he said it so casually, like she was a chapter already closed in his story. Halima stood in the hallway, frozen, tears hot behind her eyes. Not because he spoke low of her, but because she had given up so much to lift him. She gave up clients, gave up income, gave up rest, gave up herself, and now she was viewed as a drag on his momentum. She cooked less, spoke less, smiled less. He didn't notice, or maybe he did, and just didn't care. They shared a home, but not a life. They shared a bed, but not dreams. They were no longer a team. They were cohabitants, one reaching, the other already gone. And the saddest part, he didn't need to scream, argue, or curse. All he had to do was stop seeing her, and that was exactly what he did. She showed up like most threats do, casually, quietly, and too close for comfort. Carice wasn't mentioned often at first. Zachary referred to her simply as the new assistant, a recent business graduate from a private university. Sharp, efficient, good with clients. Halima remembered the first time she heard the name. It was during dinner. Zachary had come home later than usual, tossed his keys on the granite counter, and casually said, "Carice handled the investor deck today. She's proving useful." Halima nodded. "That's good." He kept eating, eyes locked on his phone. In the following weeks, Carice's name started slipping into conversations more frequently. Sometimes in passing, Carice scheduled that. "Carice said we should try the updated strategy. Carice reminded me of your meeting with my mother. Too familiar, too comfortable, but not overt. Not yet." Then came the laughter. One morning, Halima walked past his home office and paused. The door was slightly open. Zachary was on a video call. She heard him chuckle, a sound she hadn't heard from him in weeks. "You're ridiculous," he said, amused. "No, I mean that in a good way." The tone wasn't professional. It was flirtatious, just beneath the surface, wrapped in banter. Later that night, she asked, "So, Carice seems helpful." He barely looked up from his tablet. "She's fine. Handles what she needs to." "Why?" Halima shrugged. "Just wondering." He didn't ask her what she meant. Didn't pick up on her tone. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. The next day, she noticed the calendar on the fridge had a luncheon marked in his handwriting. VC lunch with Carice plus Alex. When she casually asked if it went well, he replied, "Didn't happen. She had a migraine." But the next morning, Carice's voice echoed on speakerphone. "Glad I could finally wear that red dress. Worth it." Halima froze. Red dress? Migraine? Her pulse quickened, but she stayed quiet. It wasn't proof. Not yet. Carice was smart. She knew how to exist in the grey zone. Flirt without crossing. Compliment without sounding suggestive. Present just enough charm to feel memorable, but not enough to raise alarms. Unless you were the wife watching the slow shift from the sidelines. Halima watched as Carice became a fixture. Emails at odd hours, inside jokes Halima didn't understand. Little changes in Zachary's schedule he no longer bothered explaining. She never confronted it. Not yet. Because some betrayals start as whispers before they become storms. And Halima, always observant, already knew. The wind was changing. The moment it happened wasn't dramatic. There was no explosive reveal. No lipstick on the collar. No hotel receipt slipped under a door. It was late afternoon. Halima had returned from a grocery run, her hands full of fresh produce and her mind swimming with meal prep ideas. The house was unusually quiet. No music, no TV, just the low hum of a voice from upstairs. She paused at the bottom of the staircase. Zachary's voice was muffled, but audible. She assumed he was on a work call. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. She simply stood still, bags in hand, waiting for a moment to call out. That's when she heard it. "I told you not to call me when I'm home." A pause. Then, a laugh. "No, she's downstairs or out. I don't know." Another pause. "Because it's complicated, Carice. That's why." Halima's hands froze around the paper bag handles. Something inside her dropped, something cold and heavy. "No, I didn't say that. I said this isn't the right time." Carice's voice filtered faintly through the speaker. Playful, teasing. Zachary chuckled again. "You're going to get me in trouble." Halima stood there for a few more seconds, not breathing. She didn't need more. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. The softness, the familiarity, the way her name came out in a whisper instead of a warning. She walked to the kitchen slowly, her legs numb. Set the groceries down without a sound. She didn't confront him that night. Instead, she watched him during dinner. The way he smiled at his phone. The way he avoided her gaze when she asked about his day. The way he responded to her presence like it was background noise. He didn't realize the damage he'd done wasn't just about cheating. It was about shifting the entire dynamic without her consent. About making her feel like an outsider in a life she helped build. Later that evening, when he went to take a call in the hallway, she heard him laugh again. This time, she didn't flinch. She just walked upstairs, closed the bathroom door, and sat on the edge of the tub. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the floor, remembering all the times she chose him, even when it was hard, even when he didn't choose her back. And now, the betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It had a voice, a name, a ringtone. It took her 3 days to ask, 3 days of pretending, 3 days of forcing smiles, folding towels, and placing dinner plates on the table like nothing had changed. Until one evening, as he scrolled through his phone on the couch, Halima asked softly, "Are you seeing her?" He looked up slowly. "Who?" "Carice." He blinked, long and deliberate. "Where is this coming from?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply said, "I heard you," on the call. Silence. He set the phone down, leaned back. "You're being paranoid." Halima stood across from him, her arms crossed, not in anger but in quiet disbelief. "Zach, I'm not stupid." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, you've been acting different for months. You're always watching me like I'm the enemy, because you are hiding things." He laughed, short, sharp. "Or maybe you're just bitter because you don't recognize yourself anymore." She flinched. "Excuse me?" He stood. "I come home, and it's like I'm walking into a cloud. You used to smile. You used to care about how you looked, how you carried yourself. I've been carrying you." She snapped, the first time her voice cracked. He stepped closer, cold now. "You let yourself go, Halima. You don't try anymore. Not with your hair, not with how you dress, not even with me." Every word struck like a blade. "You're not the woman I married." She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. Zachary didn't yell. He didn't shove. But he didn't have to. His words hit her deeper than fists ever could. She whispered, "You think I stopped trying because I don't care?" He didn't respond, just picked up his phone again. "I sacrificed my body, my mind, my life to take care of you," she said, her voice shaking. "And now, you blame me for not fitting your image anymore?" He shrugged. "I didn't ask you to do all that." And with that, he walked away. That night, Halima didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, quietly, mocking how fast everything else was spinning in her mind. She replayed his words over and over. "You let yourself go. You're not the woman I married. I didn't ask you to do all that." Each phrase landed like a slap. Not just because they were cruel, but because they were said with such calm detachment, as if he believed them. As if they were facts. She moved through the house like a ghost. No music, no podcasts, just silence and the soft hum of betrayal. She cooked his breakfast the next morning. Eggs, toast, a bowl of sliced fruit. He didn't thank her, didn't look her in the eye, just grabbed a protein shake and walked out. She didn't speak, didn't chase, didn't explain. There comes a point when words lose meaning, when love feels like an old story no one wants to read anymore. Halima wore the same hoodie for days, not out of laziness, but because she no longer felt the need to perform for someone who saw her as invisible. She showered, she cleaned, she answered emails, but the sparkle was gone. And the worst part, Zachary didn't notice, or maybe he did. And it didn't matter. The man she once nursed back to life now saw her as a burden, not a blessing. The woman who once believed their love could weather anything now stood in front of a mirror, wondering how she ended up apologizing for being human. She didn't cry in public. She smiled when neighbors waved. She said, "I'm good," when friends asked. But inside, she was unraveling quietly, piece by piece. And the man who should have held her hand, he was too busy holding someone else's attention. December crept in slowly that year. Baltimore cold and grey, with wind that bit at your knuckles. But inside the Jonna estate, lights were being strung across chandeliers, expensive. Crystal was being unpacked, and the air smelled like holiday luxury. Christmas with the Jonnas wasn't about love. It was performance, prestige, elegance. And this year, Zachary planned to use the annual Christmas Eve dinner not just as a celebration, but as a stage. He had made up his mind. Halima would receive divorce papers, not in private, not over quiet conversation, but as a gift, wrapped, delivered, public. He told his lawyer to prep everything by December 23rd, served with her name on top in red ink, tucked in a gilded envelope that looked like it belonged at the bottom of a Tiffany's bag. No one would see it coming, especially not her. It wasn't just separation, it was strategy. Zachary believed Halima would crumble. She'd cry. She'd react, maybe even beg. And that's what he wanted. He wanted those whispers from high society women validated. The ones who said Halima was never really the Jonna type, that she was too plain, too soft, too middle class to sit among the city's elite. He wanted the board members who raised eyebrows at her presence to see that he'd finally corrected the part of his life that didn't fit. The room would gasp. His father would nod approvingly. His mother would clutch her pearls, just for effect. And Zachary would play the role of dignified victim, a man trying to move on from a woman who didn't evolve. His assistant Carice had even asked, teasingly, "You're really going to do it on Christmas?" He smirked. What better time? It's symbolic, ending one year, starting another. Halima had no clue, he believed. She had stopped asking questions weeks ago. She barely spoke unless spoken to. To Zachary, that meant she was weak, unaware, distracted. But what he didn't realize was that Halima had never stopped paying attention. And while he plotted her downfall in designer wrapping, she had already begun reading his silence like scripture. 2 days before Christmas, Zachary stood on the balcony of his office, sweet, sipping bourbon and venting to his younger brother, Jalen. Jalen, a fast-talking real estate investor with too many watches and too few filters, laughed loudly as Zachary detailed his plan. "You're serious?" Jalen asked, half incredulous, half entertained. "Dead serious," Zachary replied, setting his glass down. "I'm done. I gave her time, gave her space. But she didn't rise with me. She stayed small." Jalen leaned against the railing, eyeing his brother. "Bruh. Doing it at the Christmas party, though, in front of the family. That's the point," Zachary said flatly. "I need people to see it, to understand I'm not dragging this into next year." He pulled the envelope from his desk drawer and waved it like a trophy. "She's going to break. She'll cry. And after that, peace. Freedom." Jalen chuckled again. "Man, Halima used to be your backbone. You remember that, right?" Zachary's jaw tightened. "Back when she still had direction. Now, she's just existing. She's not part of my world anymore." "You sure this isn't about Carice?" Jalen asked casually, sipping from his own cup. Zachary narrowed his eyes. "Carice is professional, helpful, she fits." Jalen shook his head with a half-smile. "You're really out here swapping out wives like you're rebranding." "It's business," Zachary muttered, "and personal. I need someone who complements the image I've built." Jalen raised both brows. "Man, just don't forget, Halima's been through the mud for you. I was there. I saw her carry you when nobody else could." Zachary dismissed the thought with a wave. "Yeah, but sympathy isn't currency in this world." Jalen didn't push further. He knew his brother. Once his mind was made up, there was no turning it. Still, as he looked down from the high-rise office into the streets below, something twisted in his gut, because Halima had always been more than quiet strength. She was strategic in silence, and Jalen, unlike his brother, had never mistaken humility for helplessness. But Zachary wasn't listening. He had his narrative written, and in his mind, the ending would be public, dramatic, and final. He had no idea the script was already being rewritten without his input. Halima wasn't supposed to know. Zachary's arrogance convinced him he'd covered his tracks, that she was too distracted or too checked. out to notice the shifts in tone, the hushed phone calls, the carefully placed manila folders. But Halima had lived with this man through storms. She'd dressed his wounds, heard his breathing patterns in pain, memorized every twitch of his face. She knew when something was off. The final confirmation came by accident, or divine timing. 2 days before Christmas, while cleaning the guest room, Halima found a stack of sealed envelopes in the bottom drawer of Zachary's desk. He often stored gala invites, client thank you notes, and formal mail there. But one envelope stood out. It had her name typed on it. No stamp, no postage, just her name. Clean, precise. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. It was sealed, but not completely. The flap had caught on the edge, just enough for her to see the heading. Dissolution of marriage agreement. She didn't scream, didn't crumble. Her fingers shook for a moment, then steadied. The plan was clear. He was going to hand it to her, like a gift. Probably at the dinner, maybe even with a speech. Halima sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The ache in her chest wasn't about the divorce. It was about the spectacle, the disrespect, the complete erasure of everything she'd sacrificed for him. He wanted humiliation. He wanted her broken in front of the people who had always questioned her worth. But Halima, she simply breathed, long, deep, intentional. She tucked the envelope back exactly as she found it, straightened the drawer, wiped her hands on her lap, and walked out with her head high. Because now, she wasn't waiting to survive the moment. She was planning how to end it with elegance. Halima didn't rage. She didn't run to friends. She didn't rant online or call her mother crying. She did what strong women do when betrayal knocks again. She planned. Quietly, intelligently, powerfully. She started by calling her attorney, one she had quietly retained months prior when the shift in Zachary became too loud to ignore. "Is it legal for me to respond to divorce papers before they're served?" she asked. The lawyer chuckled softly. "You're not only allowed to respond, you're allowed to be prepared." She spent the next day organizing everything: bank statements, digital transfers, tax returns, hidden accounts Zachary thought she didn't know about. While he bragged about his empire, she had already tracked its cracks. Next came the evidence. She had audio backups, screenshots of messages between him and Carice, phone, records, and dated receipts for dinners he claimed were work-related, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted truth. She created a folder titled My Piece. Inside it, she placed everything. Then she visited the print shop, had 2 copies made, one digital, one physical. She placed the physical version inside a red gift box, the kind with a magnetic flap and gold ribbon. Finally, she drafted her own divorce response, signed, dated, notarized. Not out of pettiness, out of preparation, because Halima had finally accepted that the man she once nursed through agony no longer saw her as human. He saw her as a loose thread, and he planned to cut her on Christmas. But what he didn't know was that Halima had already sewn a new garment, one stitched with strength, self-worth, and undeniable truth. She ordered a dress that week, deep emerald green, long-sleeved, fitted, one that would hug every inch of the woman he thought had faded. And on Christmas Eve, she'd wear it with grace. While he handed her what he thought was her undoing, she would hand him the truth, wrapped, calm, and devastating. Long before the accident, before the cold silence and sharp dismissals, Halima had a dream she never spoke about often. It started as a hobby, a stack of dotted journals she decorated with markers, sticky notes, and handwritten affirmations. Growing up in South Baltimore, she'd learned early that life rarely slowed down on its own. You had to organize your peace, protect it, build it. Her journals were her refuge. After the wedding, when she moved into the Jonner estate, a home filled with marble floors, hidden staircases, and intimidating family portraits, she turned to her journals again. They helped her navigate the pressure of old Boston money. They grounded her in a world where she felt observed but not welcomed. One evening, months before Zachary's accident, she posted a picture of her layout on Instagram. a weekly spread filled with soft colors, motivational reminders, and a minimalist design. She didn't expect anything from it, but the post went viral overnight. Women commented, "Where can I buy this? Do you sell templates? Your handwriting is beautiful. Please make these into planners." Halima hesitated at first. She didn't see herself as a business owner. She didn't even know where to begin. But something inside her whispered that her creativity had value, even if she never said it aloud. She began designing printable layouts, simple things at first, daily planners, gratitude pages, budget sheets. She created the files on her laptop late at night, after dinner, after chores, when the house finally became still. She uploaded them to Etsy. The first week, she made $48. She cried tears of joy, not because of the amount, but because someone, somewhere, found value in something she created from scratch. Her business name came to her during a quiet morning tea, Rooted Pages, because everything she'd survived, every hardship, every lesson, had rooted her deeply. Her pages reflected that. Clients began requesting physical journals. She taught herself bookbinding on YouTube. She learned about paperweight, cover materials, coil types. Her dining table became her workshop. When Zachary saw the mess one day, he frowned. "You're making notebooks?" "Planners," she corrected softly. He shrugged. "That's cute." But she wasn't doing it for approval. She was doing it because it fed her soul. Until the accident changed everything. Her journals moved to the back burner. Her listings stayed active, but new designs slowed. Her focus shifted entirely to keeping him alive and stable. And yet, even through the exhaustion, the business never completely died. It waited for her, just like her strength did. After the accident, her days blurred into endless cycles of medications, appointments, and physical therapy exercises. She barely slept. She barely ate. She lived in survival mode. But in the quietest moments, usually between 1 and 4 a.m., when Zachary was finally resting comfortably, Halima would slip downstairs with her laptop. Her planner shop became her lifeline to sanity. She designed with trembling fingers. She packaged orders while wiping tears. She printed labels beside jars of pain cream and heating pads. Sometimes she worked sitting on the floor because she was too tired to lift herself into a chair. But she kept going. Every sale notification was a little spark. "Cha-ching, you've made a sale." She'd smile softly in the darkness. Not because of the money, but because it reminded her she was still capable of creating beauty even while enduring hardship. When the shop reached 1,000 sales, she celebrated alone in the kitchen with a cup of peppermint tea. She didn't wake Zachary. He had started sleeping heavily from medication, and she didn't want to disturb him. When she saved her first $5,000, she opened a separate account. Not out of secrecy, out of wisdom. Her heart was still loyal, but her intuition whispered, "Have something of your own. Always." She never once used the money for herself. Every cent she reinvested into supplies, software, marketing tools. During his recovery, she'd sit beside his hospital bed, sketching new cover designs. Nurses would compliment her artwork. Even they didn't realize how much those words kept her going. Sometimes she'd show the designs to him. "What do you think?" she'd ask gently. He rarely looked away from the TV. "Yeah, sure, babe. Looks fine. Fine. Never more." But she didn't stop. Rooted Pages grew because she nourished it in the cracks of her pain, like a wildflower pushing through concrete. While he slept, she built. While he ignored her, she grew. While he drifted away, she planted seeds he never cared to understand. And now those seeds were blooming, quietly, steadily, far beyond what he ever imagined. What began as late-night sketches gradually turned into a thriving micro-brand. Instagram followers grew from hundreds to thousands. TikTok videos showing her journal flips reached hundreds of thousands of views. Pinterest pins went viral weekly. Women loved her soft aesthetic, neutral tones, clean designs, motivational messages written in her elegant handwriting. They loved her caption style too, honest, warm, vulnerable. She wasn't selling planners. She was selling peace. Soon she had brand ambassadors, college students, moms, teachers, entrepreneurs, all posting videos using her planners for productivity. She formed a small community, the Rooted Circle. They shared success stories, mental health check-ins, and weekly prompts. Many of them had no idea the creator behind it was sitting beside a recovering husband who barely acknowledged her presence. When TikTok creators began tagging her shop, sales tripled. Her dashboard lit up daily. $80 sale, $120 sale, $45. Sale, $210 sale, $300 corporate order. She started waking up to dozens of notifications. Still, she stayed quiet. She didn't buy anything flashy, didn't brag, didn't slip up financially, didn't post her face. She wanted privacy. She simply stacked her earnings. By the time Zachary was fully mobile again, Halima had quietly saved more than $95,000. All legally hers, all documented, all earned through grit and creativity. While he grew colder, her independence grew warmer. She could pay rent on her own if she had to. She could move tomorrow if needed. She could rebuild a life in Baltimore or start fresh in another city. She was far from helpless. She was prepared. But she didn't rush. Instead, she kept building. She secured trademarks, filed for an LLC, started outsourcing printing, opened a business credit line, moved all archives to cloud storage, all without missing a single appointment, meal, or medication for him. She carried both roles, caretaker and creator. And now, she was about to carry herself too. Halima's quiet strength transformed into quiet strategy. When she discovered the divorce envelope hidden in his drawer, she didn't panic. She activated a plan she had already begun shaping months earlier. Her lawyer, a calm, sharp black woman named Ornis, admired her composure. "You're more prepared than most clients I meet," Ornis said during their first consultation. Halima smiled faintly. "I've had time to think." The legal file grew quickly. Account records, his infidelity patterns, Clarice's messages, evidence of emotional neglect, insurance statements, proof of her role in his recovery, copies of her business earnings. Every detail was documented, every document time-stamped, every backup stored in 3 places. Ornis reviewed the material and nodded approvingly. "You're not just ready for the divorce, Halima. You're ready for your next life." Halima inhaled slowly. "That's the goal. Do you want spousal support?" "No," Halima answered quickly. "I want my dignity and my peace." "Do you want to contest the split?" "No," she said again. "Let him keep the empire he cares so much about. I am building my own." The lawyer paused, then smiled. "I respect that." Halima also prepared emotionally. She practiced her breathing, journaled her thoughts, packed a suitcase with essentials, one he would never notice missing, stored her business files in a safe deposit box, booked a short-term rental under a business name. No chaos, no scrambling, no surprise, just readiness. Because while Zachary spent weeks planning her humiliation, she spent months planning her liberation, and the more she prepared, the lighter she felt. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving, she was steering. Halima stood in the bathroom mirror one night, studying her reflection. Her face looked calmer, firmer, stronger. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She wasn't lost. She wasn't begging. She was ready. On Christmas Eve, she would walk into that mansion with grace. She would sit at that long table under crystal lights. She would watch him present his gift, believing she would crumble, but she wouldn't cry. She wouldn't shake. She wouldn't plead, because he had no idea. She was already 10 steps ahead. The Jonna estate lit up like a palace that night. It was tradition. Every Christmas Eve, the family hosted an invitation-only gathering that rivaled anything the local press had seen all year. Snow dusted the hedges. A valet line wrapped around the circular drive. Guests in fur coats and tailored tuxedos exited black cars like royalty. Champagne was served the moment you walked through the door. The aroma of rosemary lamb and truffle risotto wafted from the kitchen. Waitstaff wore white gloves and practiced smiles. Soft piano music filled the rooms, while photographers snapped discreet shots of the city's wealthiest rubbing elbows. This wasn't a party. It was a declaration of influence. The mansion sparkled with golden ornaments, custom wreaths imported from Italy, and a 14-foot Christmas tree dressed in crystals. It stood like a monument in the grand hall. Zachary moved through the space like a host who had already won. He greeted everyone with charm, clinked glasses, took pictures, made small talk about stock portfolios, tech trends, and political predictions for the new year. He looked untouchable, the embodiment of power and polished control. His parents beamed nearby, especially his mother, who had personally reviewed the guest list. "I told you, this year's guest count would break last year's," she whispered proudly. Jalen, standing by the fireplace with a drink in hand, watched his brother with a strange mix of detachment and concern. He hadn't forgotten their earlier conversation. Something still didn't sit right. The whispers had already begun. "Is Halima coming? I heard they've been distant. Maybe she's not suitable for these circles anymore." Zachary smiled as he listened. Let the gossip fly. After tonight, everything would be settled. He had the envelope in his jacket. The divorce papers, gold-trimmed, signed, neatly folded, ready to present like a well-planned closing argument. He had even rehearsed the line, "Sometimes peace looks like letting go. Tonight, I'm choosing peace." He imagined the gasps, the sympathy nods, the congratulations masked in sorrow. He imagined Halima stunned, speechless, devastated, just enough to make the story memorable. He was ready for the grand finale, but what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the real story wasn't being written in his jacket pocket. It was walking through the front doors in heels. The sound of heels tapping on polished marble caught everyone's attention. Heads turned. Even the pianist missed a note. Halima entered with the kind of grace that made people pause mid-conversation. She wore a deep emerald green dress, tailored to perfection, hugging her waist and flowing with every step. Her hair, natural and free, framed her face like a halo. Her skin glowed under the chandelier lights, and her makeup was soft but intentional. A gentle bronze shimmer on her cheeks, lips lined with quiet power. She didn't walk like someone attending a party. She walked like someone arriving to collect what she already owned. For a moment, the room hushed. Then came the murmurs. "Is that? She looks incredible. Wow, I didn't know she could." Zachary turned, and for the first time in months, he was speechless. He had expected her to come looking fragile, desperate, clinging, maybe in a plain dress or a recycled outfit. The version of her he thought had long faded into the background. But this was a woman who had rebuilt herself from ash. She didn't seek his eyes. She didn't acknowledge the whispers. She smiled at the staff, nodded at a few distant relatives, and walked past the tree like it didn't intimidate her, because it didn't. Zachary moved toward her, slightly off balance. "You came," he said, trying to maintain composure. "I said I would," she replied, smooth as velvet. "You look." He trailed off. She didn't finish the compliment for him. She didn't need to. She greeted his mother with poise. "Mrs. Jonna." The older woman blinked, stunned. "Halima, you look just beautiful. Thank you." Halima found her place at the long dining table near the middle, a spot that forced everyone to see her. She folded her hands, calm, observant. Jalen watched from the side, eyes narrowing. This wasn't the energy of a woman about to be humiliated. This was the energy of someone who knew something. Zachary swallowed hard and checked the envelope in his jacket for the third time. He reminded himself he still controlled the narrative. But his palms had started to sweat, and somewhere deep in his gut, a sliver of doubt cracked his confidence. Dinner was elegant, as expected. Courses rolled out like clockwork: artisan soup, glazed duck, delicate pasta with white truffle oil. The conversation buzzed softly, mostly about investments and vacations. Wine glasses clinked. Halima barely spoke unless spoken to, But her silence wasn't timid, it was intentional. Every time someone tried to diminish her with small talk, she met their gaze with a smile so still it made them shift in their seat. Zachary waited until the final course, dessert, before making his move. He stood, tapping his spoon against his glass. The room gradually quieted. "Family, friends," he began, with a polite grin. "First, thank you all for joining us tonight. It means a lot to celebrate this season surrounded by people who've supported us all year." A few nods. A few raised glasses. "I've always believed in transparency," he continued. "In love, in life, in knowing when to hold on and when to release." Halima sat still, her hands in her lap, face unreadable. "This year has been transformative," he added, eyes shifting toward her. "And tonight, I want to share something that reflects a personal decision, one made with peace and with clarity." He reached into his jacket, slowly pulling out the envelope. Gold-edged, embossed, heavy. Halima didn't blink. "This," he said, holding it aloft for all to see, "is my gift, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. Because peace sometimes looks like letting go." He extended it toward her. The room held its breath. Jaws tightened, fingers gripped wine stems. His mother looked alarmed. Even Carice, standing quietly in the corner near the bar, froze. Halima took the envelope. Everyone watched. She looked at it briefly, then set it aside, calmly. "Thank you," she said, voice quiet but steady. And just as the tension crept higher, as Zachary prepared to bask in control, she reached into her clutch. A small red box. She stood. "I have something too," she said softly, but clearly. The room shifted. You could feel it. Even Zachary blinked, confused. "What?" Halima stepped around the table, heels silent against the floor. She handed him the red box, beautifully wrapped, magnetic closure, subtle ribbon. "No speech," she added. "Just open it." He opened the box. Inside was a set of documents, a divorce agreement, signed by her, legal disclosures, and beneath them, digital evidence, photos, messages, bank statements, and one note. "I didn't stay because I couldn't leave. I stayed because I believed you still had goodness, but now, I choose me." The room didn't gasp. It froze. Zachary's hand trembled as he held the contents of the red box. Each document peeled away a layer of his carefully crafted image, a notarized copy of her divorce response, evidence of financial concealment, off-the-record payments, flagged deposits, secret cash transactions, screenshots from Carice, audio transcripts of calls, and the note. That note. He looked up at her, eyes wide, lips parted, searching for a response that didn't exist. Halima didn't gloat. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned to the room, shoulders relaxed. "I wish you all a warm holiday season," she said. "May we all learn to protect what builds us and release what breaks us." Then, turning back to Zachary, she added, "You don't get to write my ending." She walked toward the door. Mrs. Johnner stood abruptly. "Halima, please." Halima turned. "You raised a man who expected me to break. But I didn't. I built," and with that, she left. No chaos, no screaming, no destroyed furniture. Just grace. The moment she exited, the mansion was pierced by silence. Jalen stood in place, jaw tight. Carice slipped out of the hallway without a word. Zachary remained frozen, the red box on the table, a dozen eyes locked on him, not with admiration, but with quiet judgment. The woman they thought would be shattered was the one who shattered them. For several seconds, the room existed in absolute stillness. Only the faint clinking of a dessert spoon dropping from someone's trembling hand broke the silence. Zachary stood frozen, holding the red box like it burned him. The documents inside, the truth he never expected, stared back at him like an indictment. His mother, Eleanor Johnner, gasped so sharply that a nearby waiter flinched. "Oh, my goodness," she whispered, hand covering her mouth. Her eyes darted between the evidence in the box and her son's face. Disbelief carved itself into every wrinkle around her eyes. She prided herself on control, on refinement, on perfection, but nothing about this moment could be controlled. She reached for the papers, scanning them with growing horror. "Zachary, what is this?" she asked, voice trembling. Before he could answer, the sounds of shocked murmurs began to ripple across the room. "Is that? Those look like... Was he cheating? And she already had a lawyer." People tried to whisper, but whispers soared in rooms filled with tension. Carice, standing near the edge of the dining room, turned completely pale. Her hand flew to her chest, and she took a stumbling step backward. She looked like she'd been caught in headlights she never expected. Her phone buzzed in her purse, maybe messages from friends watching the livestream stories, or noticing she'd been in too many photos with the CEO, but she didn't dare reach for it. Her eyes fixated on the evidence with dread. Zachary's world began to collapse inward. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. Not charisma, not confidence, not justification, nothing. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control. Jalen, arms crossed, stared at his older brother in stunned silence. He'd warned him. He'd sensed the imbalance. But even he didn't expect Halima's response to be this strategic, this flawless. "Bro," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "You did this to yourself." Eleanor stepped toward Halima's empty chair, gripping it like it might steady her. "How long has this been happening?" she demanded at her son, voice quivering but fierce. Zachary swallowed hard. "Mom, it's not what it looks." "Oh, it looks exactly like what it is," she snapped, pointing at the evidence. "You humiliated your wife tonight, on a holiday, in front of everyone, and she handled it with dignity, something you clearly lost." Her words sliced through the room. Guests pretended not to stare, but every eye was on him. Every judgment he'd ever cast at Halima curved back at him. Carice's voice cracked as she finally whispered, "Zach, what do we do?" He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw how messy, how public, how ugly this moment had become. And Halima wasn't even standing there anymore. She had already walked out the door, leaving him to sit in the destruction he built. He felt weak in the knees. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. This was not the ending he rehearsed. This was not the image he crafted. This was exposure, pure, raw exposure. And the worst part, the woman he thought he could break, had dismantled him with calm precision. Outside the mansion, the air was cold, crisp and clear. Snow dusted the driveway, catching the glow of lanterns placed along the walkway. The night felt almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. But Halima didn't rush. Her steps remained unhurried, elegant, sure. She had walked through fire for years. Tonight, she walked into liberation. Behind her, the mansion doors swung open. "Halima." It was Eleanor's voice, heavy with emotion. Halima stopped but didn't turn around. Eleanor, trying to gather her breath, approached her with small, careful steps. "Please, wait," she managed. Halima finally faced her. Eleanor's eyes were glossy, her usually perfect composure shaking. She had always been formal with Halima, polite but distant, the kind of mother-in-law who saw her son's wife as an accessory to the family brand, rather than a living, breathing person. But now, dignity cracked under guilt. "Halima," she whispered, voice breaking, "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Halima nodded gently. "I believe you." Those 3 words alone nearly made Eleanor cry. "But why?" Eleanor paused. "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you defend yourself sooner?" Halima's voice was soft but resolute. "Because I was trying to protect what I thought still existed." "And now?" Eleanor asked. Halima exhaled, slow and steady. "Now, I choose myself." The wind stilled. Even the quiet hum of distant cars seemed to fade. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing the weight of those words. "You're such a good woman," she whispered. Better than my son deserved in this season of his life. Halima didn't respond. She didn't need to. Inside the mansion, Zachary finally burst through the doors, face flushed, breath heavy. Halima, wait. She looked at him calmly. No drama, she reminded him. No spectacle. You gave me your answer in front of everyone. I simply returned the truth. He stepped closer, panicked. You blindsided me. No, she corrected. You underestimated me. He blinked. Hard. I can fix this, he insisted. We can talk. We can figure something out. There's nothing to fix, she replied. And we did figure something out. She placed her hand gently on her chest. I figured out my worth. Zachary reached for her, but she stepped back. Her voice dropped to a whisper, softer but sharper than anything he had ever heard from her. I choose myself. Those words shattered the last illusion he'd been clinging to, because she meant them, fully, irrevocably, and the moment she spoke them aloud, his world lost its center. Eleanor stepped forward again, gently placing a hand over her heart. Halima, please, she said softly, don't disappear from us entirely. Halima blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected this conversation, not from a woman who once scrutinized her table manners, her wardrobe, her posture at charity functions. But tonight, Eleanor wasn't speaking as the matriarch of a wealthy family. Tonight, she spoke as a woman who had just realized her son's failure. Cost her something she didn't know she valued, Halima's presence. You brought warmth into this home, Eleanor continued. You cared for him when even we couldn't reach him. You showed patience I still don't understand. You softened our edges. Her voice trembled. You weren't just his wife. You became part of us. And I cannot pretend I don't feel the loss. Halima exhaled slowly, touched but steady. I didn't make this choice lightly. I know, Eleanor whispered. Behind them, Zachary watched, helplessly, as his own mother gravitated not toward him, but toward the woman he discarded. Mom, please, he muttered. Eleanor didn't even turn to him. Instead, she took Halima's hands gently in her own. You are welcome in my home any time, she said. No matter what happens with him, no matter where life takes you. Halima smiled softly. Thank you. Truly, she didn't promise weekly dinners. She didn't promise continued tradition. But she didn't shut the door either. And that was enough. Eleanor squeezed her hands once more before stepping back. Carice, who had been lingering near the door, finally approached, or tried to. She took one step, and Jalen discreetly blocked her path. Not your moment, he murmured. Carice froze again, cheeks burning with embarrassment. Halima glanced at her briefly, not with spite, not with anger, but with clarity. You can have whatever version of him you think you're getting, Halima said quietly. Just understand, you're inheriting all the pieces he refuses to fix. Carice's lips parted, but no sound escaped. Jalen let out a low whistle. She didn't lie. Zachary felt something in his chest collapse, a crushing realization that the woman he'd dismissed, with such arrogance, had just handled the entire room with grace no one could deny. And worse, she had seen straight through him. Halima turned toward the driveway. Her car sat under the glow of lanterns, snowflakes glistening against the windshield. The night air was chilly but refreshing, almost cleansing. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement, the sound rhythmic, confident. Behind her, she heard Zachary take a shaky breath. Halima, don't go, please. She didn't turn around. Goodbye, Zach. He took another step. I didn't think you'd leave. You've been gone for months, she replied. I'm just catching up. He felt that line in his bones. She opened the car door. Eleanor whispered, tears shimmering, take care of yourself, and if you ever need anything, call me. I mean that. Halima nodded, touched. Thank you, for everything. As she slid into the driver's seat, the estate lights reflected across her face. She no longer looked like a woman climbing out of heartbreak. She looked like a woman stepping into destiny. She started the engine. Snowflakes drifted lazily across the windshield. The night swallowed the noise of the party behind her. As she pulled away from the estate, She didn't look in the rearview mirror, because her future wasn't behind her. Her future was rooted pages, her new home, her peace, her freedom, her identity rediscovered. She drove into the cold winter night with warmth blooming inside her chest, not because she escaped, but because she chose. She chose clarity. She chose strength. She chose self-respect. She chose herself. And she didn't regret a single step. Zachary Jonah's curated image as a powerful, unshakable CEO begins to unravel in public. First comes the leaked footage, grainy but undeniable, of him and Carice in an intimate moment at a business retreat while Halima was still legally his wife. The video spreads like wildfire, stirring both scandal and corporate scrutiny. But the worst is yet to come. A quiet IRS investigation escalates into a public audit. Financial discrepancies arise, misfiled documents, diverted funds. Within weeks, whispers turn to headlines. CEO caught in tax scandal. Affair and audit rock Jonah Enterprises. Stock prices plunge. Zachary's largest investors begin pulling out. Public relations scrambles, but the damage is done. Carice, once smugly confident, is nowhere to be found publicly, retreating into silence to save face. Meanwhile, Zachary's staff resign in waves, and the board suspends him from operational duties. What started as a clean, calculated power play against Halima becomes the storm that wipes away everything he thought was invincible. The empire he once ruled now bleeds in plain sight. While Zachary's fall plays out in media headlines, Halima steps into the quiet rhythm of creation. Her planner and journal business, once a dream sketched in spiral-bound notebooks, during sleepless nights, now comes to life with focused clarity. She opens her first storefront in a cozy but high-traffic corner in Brooklyn. The walls are painted in warm earth tones, the scent of fresh paper and lavender candles lingering in the air. Shelves brim with hand-bound journals, affirmations, goal-setting tools, all designs Halima crafted herself. On opening day, there's no viral video, no PR team, just her new assistant, Emaya, a young woman she mentored from her community, and a handwritten sign, Rooted Paper Company, for the woman becoming. Women from all walks of life trickle in, some curious, some searching. Many recognize Halima not from scandal, but from her empowering posts on social media. A quiet line forms. Sales aren't explosive, but they're real. Real women buying real tools for change. She tears up as a mother buys 3 planners, one for me, one for my daughter, one for my niece. We're tired of surviving. We want to build. Halima doesn't just launch a business. She reclaims herself. She begins spending more time in her community. Every Saturday, she hosts journaling circles at the store, black and brown women sharing their stories, griefs, and visions. The sessions begin with prayer or poetry, then writing, then soft music. No press, no pity, just peace. She reconnects with her roots, embracing the fabrics, food, and wisdom passed down from her grandmother. A seamstress from their block offers to collaborate. Halima's journals now include Ankara cloth-covered editions. A local artist paints a mural outside her store. Halima, head held high, with golden ink flowing from her pen. She invites high school girls for business mentorship, teaching them about ownership, branding, and budgeting. She partners with a neighborhood library to sponsor scholarship journals for girls who can't afford them. What Zachary tried to reduce to just a housewife becomes a force. A woman not just healing, but lifting others. She walks into church one Sunday and is embraced, not pitied. "You kept your heart clean," the pastor's wife whispers. "That's why God could multiply your pain into purpose." Months later, headlines shift. Jonah Enterprises is acquired in a quiet fire sale. Zachary Jonah is no longer CEO. He's not even on the board. His mother has moved to a retirement home. Carice now teaches Pilates in Florida. Her dreams of being the next Mrs. Jonah vanished like smoke. And Halima? She's featured in a major online magazine for black women in entrepreneurship. Not for drama, but for the impact of Rooted Paper Company. When asked in the interview what her proudest moment is, she smiles. It wasn't the storefront. It was the first time I slept through the night without asking God why he let me love a man like that. The interviewer asks about Zachary. Halima answers calmly, I wish him peace, but I don't belong in his storms anymore. She ends the interview with a quote she keeps inside her own planner. Peace isn't a place you arrive at. It's a choice, every morning. And I choose it. The camera clicks. She returns to the store. A group of girls wait for her workshop, and for the first time in a long time, she feels it. Not just freedom, but joy. The air inside Rooted Paper Company carries the scent of ink, cedar, and courage. Every Thursday afternoon, Halima clears the center floor and rolls out a vibrant rug where a dozen teenage girls from the local high school gather. They come with worn sneakers, tight braids, and guarded eyes. But Halima sees through it. She sees the girl she once was. Brilliant, underestimated, surviving. She starts each session with a question, what are you afraid of, and what are you going to do anyway? Some girls shrug. Others write quietly. One week, a shy girl named Latrice says, I'm scared I'll never be good enough, but I'm still applying to art school. Halima doesn't correct her grammar. She claps. The room follows. The journaling workshops evolve into life sessions. Halima teaches them how to set boundaries, how to negotiate pay, how to spot when love starts looking like control. She brings in guest speakers, black women who are designers, bakers, coders, and community organizers. One afternoon, she shares the story of her first planner sale. I was shaking, y'all. But fear doesn't mean stop. It just means step anyway. Word spreads. A local councilwoman invites her to speak at a neighborhood leadership forum. She stands at the podium in a soft blue dress, hair pulled back into a crown braid, her voice calm but full. You don't have to be rich to be powerful. You just have to be rooted. Afterward, women line up to meet her. Some hug her with tears. One whispers, you made it out with grace. That gives the rest of us hope. It starts with a text, an unfamiliar number. Just 5 words, Halima. May I speak with you? She stares at the screen. It's been nearly a year since the scandal. Since the papers. Since she last heard his voice. She replies, if this is who I think it is, I'll agree to a public place. 1 time. 1 hour. He chooses a quiet diner tucked near the East River, away from the places where power plays out in tailored suits. When Halima walks in, he's already seated. No ring, no expensive watch. His hair is longer, shoulders slumped. The arrogance that once filled the room with static is gone. Zachary rises as she approaches. Halima. She nods, but doesn't sit yet. Why now? He sighs. Because I've lost everything that doesn't matter, and I finally see what does. She sits, not out of softness, but because dignity doesn't flinch. He talks about the fallout, about his mother's silence, about Carice leaving, about therapy. I've started rebuilding, but not for show, for real. Halima listens. She doesn't interrupt, but she watches him closely. There are no excuses in his tone, no begging. Just a broken man trying to make sense of who he once was. At one point he says, I remember when you used to hum while cleaning. That sound stayed with me longer than anything money ever gave. She swallows, not because it hurts, but because she remembers too. When the check comes, Halima reaches for her wallet. Zachary stops her. Let me at least cover this. She lets him, not because she can't afford it. Rooted Paper Company is thriving. But because grace is not weakness. They step outside. The wind picks up along the East River. He turns to her. Halima, I don't expect anything. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For the lies. For the silence. For making you think you weren't enough. She nods. Thank you for saying it. That matters. A long pause. Then he dares to ask, do you ever miss us? She's quiet. Then she says, I miss the woman I used to be when I believed in us, but I love the woman I've become without you more. He blinks. That's his answer. She continues, Zachary, we were a lesson, not a legacy. I'll never shame the love we had, but I won't return to it either. Closure isn't about reopening doors. It's about finally locking them and walking free. He looks down. You've changed. She smiles, soft but firm. No. I just stopped shrinking. They part without hugs. Just a nod. A man who finally owned his failures. A woman who no longer needed to carry them. Later that night, Halima sits at her desk with her favorite gold pen. She flips open her newest journal. The cover reads, "Write what you've survived." She writes, "Today, I saw the man I once would have risked everything for, and I didn't flinch, I didn't ache, I just wished him healing. That's how I know I'm free." She pauses, eyes glancing toward the wall where a photo of her grandmother hangs, wrapped in kente, lips mid-laugh. Peace, she realizes, isn't the absence of pain. It's the refusal to let pain choose your direction. She remembers something her pastor once said, "Peace doesn't beg, it walks, and where it walks, dignity follows." She writes that down too. Outside, a light snow begins to fall. She doesn't post about the meeting with Zachary. Doesn't need to. Her life is no longer about proving anything to anyone. The next morning, she's back at the store. Mia opens early to prep for a teen vision board session. One girl asks Halima, "Do you think someone like me could ever make it big?" Halima kneels to eye level. "You don't have to make it big. Just make it true. The rest will come." She stands, glances out the window at the city that once swallowed her whole, and now hums quietly as she thrives. No one saw this version of Halima coming. That was the point. They underestimated the power of a woman who found herself after being thrown away, and now her peace walks every day, head held high, hand on her purpose, heart finally whole. The auditorium buzzed with quiet anticipation as hundreds of women from across the city filled the velvet rows of the Harlem Women's Empowerment Summit. Some wore tailored blazers, others head wraps and sneakers, but all shared one thing in common: they were here to listen, to learn, to rise. Backstage, Halima adjusted her microphone headset, smoothing the sleeve of her emerald green blouse. The same gold ring her triplets gave her on her first business anniversary sat proudly on her right hand. Next to her sat her journal, worn, marked with highlighter and tea stains, pages brimming with the roots of her story. The MC's voice rang through the room. "Please welcome to the stage, founder of Rooted, paper company, mother of 3, survivor of betrayal, and builder of beginnings, Halima Kings." Applause thundered. Halima stepped into the light, not as someone trying to be seen, but as someone who finally saw herself. She began, "A year ago, I was standing in a courtroom trying not to cry, not because of what was taken from me, but because I finally realized what I wouldn't let be taken. My worth." The room went still, every eye locked on her. She spoke of cleaning marble floors while hiding morning sickness, of overhearing boardroom gossip, meant to break her, of finding a dusty box and deciding it would carry more than paper. It would carry dreams. She spoke of loss, but not with bitterness. She spoke of Zachary, but never as a villain, only as a mirror of what she chose to walk away from. And she spoke of what she built instead. There's power in deciding your story doesn't end with someone else's decision. I didn't get a happy ending handed to me. I wrote it myself, page by page. Murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. Some women clapped, others wiped silent tears. Halima paused as the lights dimmed slightly. A slide behind her showed an image of the first Rooted paper company workshop. 10 teenage girls sitting cross-legged, laughing, journaling, healing. She turned back to the crowd. "I didn't come here to shame the people who hurt me. That's not healing. I came to teach from the fire they thought would burn me down." The room nodded with silent reverence. She spoke of Carice, not with venom, but with clarity. Jealousy doesn't start big, it starts small, when we think someone else's light dims ours. I forgave her, because carrying bitterness is like drinking poison hoping it hurts someone else. A woman in the front whispered amen under her breath. Halima shared how she'd channeled her heartbreak into community, offering internships for single moms, launching scholarship kits for underfunded schools, and building not just a planner brand, but a sisterhood of ambition. Your past is a teacher, not a tattoo. It's allowed to shape you, but not define you. Her voice softened. I share my story because too many women are taught to hide their pain, to carry shame that was never theirs, to apologize for surviving. The crowd stood to their feet, many clapping with conviction, others simply nodding, hearts full. A young girl, maybe 16, shouted from the back, "You saved me, Miss Halima." Halima smiled, pressed her hand to her chest, and said into the mic, "Nah, baby girl. You saved you. I just reminded you what was already inside." 3 blocks away, inside a modest bookstore cafe in Brooklyn, a man sat with a tablet propped against a cracked ceramic mug. Zachary Joyner. He didn't wear the designer coats anymore. No bodyguards, no headlines, no carice. Just a man in a quiet corner, sipping black coffee, watching the live stream on a public YouTube channel. The screen showed Halima standing tall, powerful, free. He didn't blink. It had been a year since their last meeting, since her words, that they were a lesson, not a legacy, cut through him like a blade made of truth. He hadn't tried to reach out again. She made her boundary clear. But he never stopped watching from the distance she requested. He read every rooted newsletter, bought every product anonymously, not because he hoped for a way back in, but because he knew now the greatest apology wasn't in trying again. It was in changing quietly. His world was smaller now. He worked at a mid-sized firm in a back-end role. No suits, no titles, just rebuilding. Sometimes he'd sit at the park across from her store just to see her, wave at her staff, laugh with her customers, hug her children. He once saw her help an elderly man whose bag ripped open. She kneeled on the sidewalk without hesitation, scooping up spilled yams and oranges into her tote bag. That's who she was, always had been, and that's who he hadn't deserved. Now, as he watched her command a summit stage like it was built for her, Zachary didn't feel regret as a weapon. He felt it as a whisper. She had flown, and he had learned, finally, to stop clipping his own wings. The summit stage dimmed slightly again as Halima stepped forward for her final message. She looked out into the sea of women, some CEOs, some students, some survivors, and breathed in slowly. "This is the last thing I'll say today," she said, voice grounded like stone. "Don't wait for someone else to give you your value. Don't give people the power to set your price, because—" she paused. "You don't lose when they stop valuing you. You lose when you stop valuing yourself." The crowd roared, not in wild applause, but in thunderous, tear-choked agreement. The lights lifted. The music swelled. The summit host ran back on stage to thank her, but Halima didn't hear it. She had already turned to walk off, her journal still in hand, her spirit at peace. Backstage, Mia waited with the triplets, now 6. They ran to her with a bouquet of sunflowers and a homemade card. "You taught us that roots make wings." Halima smiled, hugged them close, and whispered, "Let's go home." Dear viewers, if Halima's journey touched something deep in you, if her strength reminded you of your own, or her story mirrored someone you love, leave a comment below. Let us know what moment moved you most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that don't just entertain, but transform.